Chapter 16. Rob sat out on the curb in front of the motel room and waited for Sistine to come back from using the phone. He had her green dress wrapped up in a grocery bag. He had tried to fold the dress up neatly, but folding a dress turned out to be an impossible task, and he finally gave up. Now he held the bag out and away from him so that the grease from the medicine on his legs would not stain it. He was relieved when Sistine finally walked toward him out of the darkness. "Hey," he said. "Hi." She sat down on the steps next to him. "How come you don't have a phone?" Rob shrugged. "Ain't got nobody to call, I guess." "My mother's coming to get me," Sistine said. Rob nodded. "Here's your dress." He handed her the bag. Sistine took it and then tilted her head to look up at the sky. Rob looked too. The clouds had shifted and there were clear patches where the stars shone through. "I can see the Big Dipper," Sistine said. "I like looking up at things." "So do my mom and dad. That's how they met. They were both looking up at the ceiling in the Sistine Chapel, and they weren't watching where they were going, and they bumped into each other. That's why I'm named Sistine." "I like your name," said Rob shyly. "I've seen the Sistine ceiling too," she said. "They took me last year, before Bridget, when they were still in love." "Does it look like the pictures?" Rob asked. "Better," said Sistine. "It's like, I don't know, it's like looking at fireworks, kinda." "Oh," said Rob. "Maybe we could go to Italy sometime, and I could show you." "That would be all right," said Rob. He smiled in the darkness. "That tiger can't look up at the stars," said Sistine, her voice getting hard. "He's got that piece of wood over his head. He can't look up at all. They've got to let him go." Rob was silent. He was hoping that if he didn't answer her, she might go back to talking about the Sistine ceiling. "How'd your mother die?" she asked suddenly. Rob sighed. He knew there was no point in trying not to answer. "Cancer," he said. "What was her name?" "I ain't supposed to talk about her," said Rob, closing his eyes to the stars and concentrating instead on his suitcase, working to keep it closed. "Why not?" asked Sistine. "Because my dad says it don't do no good to talk about it. He says she's gone and she ain't coming back. That's why we moved here from Jacksonville, because everybody always wanted to talk about her. We moved down here so we could get on with things." There was the crunch of gravel. Rob opened his eyes in time to see the headlights of a car sweep over them. "That's my mother," said Sistine. She stood up. "Quick," she said. "Tell me your mother's name." Rob shook his head. "Say it," she demanded. "Caroline," Rob said softly, cracking his suitcase open and letting the words slip out. Sistine gave him another businesslike nod of her head. "Okay," she said. "I'll come back tomorrow, and we'll make our plans for letting the tiger go." "Sissy!" called a voice. "Baby, what in the world are you doing out here?" Sistine's mother got out of the car and came walking toward them. She had on high heels, and she wobbled as she walked in the gravel parking lot of the Kentucky Star. Her hair was a lighter shade of yellow than Sistine's and piled up high. When she turned her head, Rob recognized Sistine's profile. Her sharp chin, pointed nose, but her mouth was different, tighter. "Good Lord," said Mrs. Bailey to Sistine. "What have you got on?" "Clothes," said Sistine. "Sissy, you look like a hobo. Get in the car." She tapped her high-heeled foot on the gravel. Sistine didn't move. She stood beside Rob. "Well," said her mother when Sistine didn't move, "you must be Rob. What's your last name, Rob?" "Horton," said Rob. "Horton," said Mrs. Bailey. "Horton. Are you related to, Selden Horton, the congressman?" "No, ma'am," said Rob. "I don't think so." Mrs. Bailey's eyes flicked away from him and back to Sistine. "Baby," said Mrs. Bailey, "please get in the car." When Sistine still didn't move, Mrs. Bailey sighed and looked back at Rob again. "She won't listen to a word I say," Mrs. Bailey told him. "Her father is the only one she'll listen to." And then, under her breath, she muttered, "Her father, the liar." Sistine growled somewhere deep in her throat and stalked to the car and got in and slammed the door. "You're the liar," she shouted from the back seat of the car. "You're the one who lies." "Jesus," said Mrs. Bailey. She shook her head and turned and walked back to the car without saying anything else to Rob. Rob watched them pull away. He could see Sistine sitting in the back seat. Her shoulders were slumped. A motel door slammed. Somebody laughed. A dog barked once, short and high, and then stopped. And then there was silence. "Caroline," Rob whispered into the darkness. "Caroline, Caroline, Caroline." The word was as sweet as forbidden candy on his tongue. Chapter 17. The next morning, Rob was helping Willie Mae in the laundry room. They were folding sheets and chewing 8-ball gum. All night he had tossed and turned, scratching his legs and thinking about the tiger and what Sistine had said, that he had to be set free. He had finally decided to get Willie Mae's opinion. "You ever been to a zoo?" Rob asked her. "One time," said Willie Mae. She cracked her gum. "Went to that zoo over in Sorley. Place stunk." "Do you think them animals minded it, being locked up?" "Wasn't nobody asking them, did they mind?" Willie Mae pulled another sheet out of the dryer and snapped it open. Rob tried again. "Do you think it's bad to keep animals locked up?" Willie Mae looked at him over the top of her glasses. She stared at him hard. Rob looked down at his feet. When I was but little, said Willie Mae, my daddy brought me a bird in a cage. It was a green parakeet bird. That bird was so small I could hold it right in the palm of my hand." She draped the sheet over one shoulder and held out a cupped hand to show Rob. It looked to him like a hand big enough to hold the entire world. "Held him in my hand, could feel his little heart beating. He would look at me, cock his head this way and that. Called him Cricket on account of him all the time singing." "What happened to him?" Rob asked. Willie Mae bent and took a pillowcase out of the dryer. "Let him go," she said. "You let him go?" Rob repeated, his heart sinking inside him like a stone. "Couldn't stand seeing him all locked up, so I let him go." She folded the pillowcase carefully. "And then what happened?" "I got beat by my daddy. He said I didn't do that bird no favor. Said all I did was give some snake its supper." "So you never saw him again?" Rob asked. "Nuh-uh," said Willie Mae. "But sometimes he comes flying through in my dreams, flittering about and singing." She shook her head and reached for the sheet on her shoulder. "Here," she said. "Go on and grab a hold of the other end. Help me fold this up." Rob took hold of the sheet, and as it billowed out between them, a memory rose up before him. His father standing out in the yard, holding his gun up to the sky, taking aim at a bird. "You think I can hit it?" his father said. "You think I can hit that itty-bitty bird?" "Robert," his mother said, "what do you want to shoot that bird for?" "To prove I can," said his father. There was a single crack, and the bird was suspended in midair, pinned for a moment to the sky with his father's bullet. Then it fell. "Oh, Robert," his mother said. It hurt the back of Rob's throat to think about that now, to think about the gun and his mother and the small thud the bird made when it hit the ground. "I know something that's in a cage," said Rob, pushing the words past the tightness in his throat. Willie Mae nodded her head, but she wasn't listening. She was looking past Rob, past the white sheet, past the laundry room, past the Kentucky Star. "Who don't?" she said finally. "Who don't know something in a cage?" After that, they folded the sheets in silence. Rob thought about the bird, and how, when he had finally found its small, still warm body, he had started to cry. His father told him not to. "It ain't nothing to cry over," he said. "It's just a bird." That was chapter 17.